Well, hey everyone, it's Richie and Regan Reader of Pressing On, and we've got some friends with us in this special edition video here for the month of June, where we're talking about healthcare travel. And while many of you know our family's story of Micah Joy and her rare disease and liver transplant, we have gotten all of our healthcare right here in the city of Pittsburgh. But we have some good friends in this video tonight that have traveled for healthcare issues with their children, and we just have so much respect for their story. And as Pressing On exists to uplift, resource, and coach families in crisis, we want to provide videos like this to help other families that are traveling for healthcare issues, specifically with their kids. And so we want to get to know our friends tonight, and even though we're on Zoom, we look at this as a conversation around a kitchen table among friends. So Regan, you can get us started.
All right, well, we're so glad that you're joining us. We hope that you find this video helpful in just helping you know you're not alone and helping you find some answers with some other families that are traveling a road somewhat similar to your own. So we're going to jump right in and introduce our families. I'm going to start with Garret and Tara Welsh. If you could just introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of your story.
So we're obviously the Welshes. We have our son Theo, who was born June 10th of last year. We found out of January of last year at 21 weeks pregnant that he would be born with a left-sided congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and we would have to relocate to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We live right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in order for him to get the treatment that he needed. So it was a journey.
Our other friends that are with us tonight are Bryan and Nicole Blausey. So you guys just can give us the same thing, just a little overview.
Okay. Hi, we're the Blauseys. Our daughter McKinley was diagnosed at 5 months with a soft tissue tumor called
primitive myoxylate muscle camel tumor of infancy.
We call it PMMTI. We live 30 minutes away from Pittsburgh, and I never thought we'd have to ever use it, but we have been there. We did 6 months of chemo at Children's, and then we had to go and do proton radiation in Cincinnati because Children's does not offer proton. So we did 36 treatments, which was about 7.5, 8 weeks out in Cincinnati.
Well, thank you guys for sharing. I mean, two Pittsburgh families that have great healthcare here in Pittsburgh, but needed specialty treatments in other cities, one in Cincinnati and one in Philadelphia. You know, it's one thing to come to grips with a rare disease diagnosis or a critical illness that you're unaware of, especially for your child. It's another thing to think through, wow, like now we have to travel as a result of this. So I guess the first question is, when you guys realized that you needed to travel for healthcare, like just that emotional side, like how did it make you feel as parents?
Overwhelmed.
Definitely.
Yeah. Stressed. Just.
I can remember we were only like, I don't know, a week out of learning this, and we had already found out about Philadelphia and one or two other places that did it, but Philadelphia is really the only place that made sense for us. And we were out driving around coming home from somewhere, and I remember looking at Tara and I was like, you know, we had the option to stay in Pittsburgh, but obviously without the specialty care. And I was like, so like, we can just commit and start this process. And it only took about 2 or 3 seconds, and you know, we both agreed pretty much immediately that that was the wisest decision for our son. So that was a sinking feeling, knowing what was coming for sure, but knowing that even in that moment we were making the right decision. So
You know what all 6 of us adults have to say is maybe somewhat important, but the star of the show right now is little McKinley that we've got on screen. So just have to acknowledge her and her brave fight. Yeah, it's good to see you,
and
McKinley,
we should
too.
definitely tell anyone who's watching this that we're so grateful to report that McKinley is doing well and little Theo is doing well. He's turning 1 year old tomorrow. The last year has not been without a lot of ups and downs for both of these families, and it's a roller coaster. But we're grateful when little kids like McKinley can pop in, and we know what the journey that she has traveled. So, so the next question is, how did you effectively prepare for travel? So you can think about it for a minute. Just, what did you do to prepare, whether that was from, you have other siblings and pets, and where are you going to stay when you get out there, and all of those sorts of things. So Bryan and Nicole, you want to go first?
Yeah, so we knew we would have to go to either Cincy or Philadelphia, basically since day one that she was, we knew what she had. So it was always in the back of our mind. We just never knew when we would be going. And then the way they did her treatment was a little weird. They had after every 2 rounds of chemo, they would do an MRI. And I would tell them, do we keep going or do we move on? So after she did 6 rounds, we had to move on. So it was kind of a surprise, even though we knew it was coming. But it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like now we have to go to a different hospital, new place, find a place.
Drag a kid with us, your dogs.
Yeah. We have an older son and we have 2 dogs, so we had to kind of handle that. We have parents close by, but we didn't really want to leave our dogs there for 8 weeks. And with COVID, everything was kind of shut down. Ronald McDonald House was shut down. So we ended up finding an Airbnb, and that was nice because we kind of could take whatever we wanted, and it felt less stressful knowing we had control of where we were going to stay.
Having control of who was going in, we didn't have to worry about what someone was bringing into the facility.
Yeah.
Especially with the unknowns at that point in time during the summer of last year, it was completely unknowns what we were dealing with. So we felt we had more control that way of knowing what was going to be there, who was coming in, and then just having the space to yourselves and having that me time and your alone time with your family was huge.
Yeah.
Sure. So before Garret and Tara talk, I just want to share that, I don't know when you might be watching this, but we're filming this right now in 2021. So we're still at the tail end of this pandemic. So these families were looking for houses or homes or somewhere to stay right when the pandemic was starting. So a lot of families would find a Ronald McDonald House to stay at. Those are great options. It's just not what neither of them could do that because of the closure and restrictions of COVID. So we're not saying you shouldn't look at the Ronald McDonald House. That's a really wonderful option. But Garret and Tara, what'd you end up doing?
So our social worker was great. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to assist us a whole lot because of everything. They had a small connection with a hotel in town, but it actually ended up that it was going to be more than what we did. We ended up just having to basically rent an apartment in downtown Philly. So you can imagine what that was, because Philadelphia actually had like a rental shutdown, like Airbnb and all that was like, you weren't allowed to rent an Airbnb at that time. Actually, we weren't even allowed to rent what we did rent legally, but the hotel staff or the apartment staff, once we explained our story, they opened up a unit for us that was kind of separate from everybody else. And again, Ronald McDonald's houses were shut down, and there's a great organization called Host for Hospitals, which again, amazing for what they charge for what you get. But again, people didn't want you in their house to host you per se.
I think, like, COVID aside though too, you have to ask yourself what you're comfortable with, but what support you need too. Because a lot of people go to the Ronald McDonald House too to be around people that are going through similar situations.
That's what we were looking for.
And just to have that like camaraderie going through it. Obviously during a global pandemic, you don't necessarily want that. But I think that's a big part in it too. Like Airbnbs for us, I don't like, now that we've done it, I don't know that I would have wanted to be around other people, staying in someone's home, but it's a great option and it's a reasonable option as far as pricing goes. And you're able, the big thing too is you have to take into consideration the drive to the hospital too, because after you've been there all day long, you don't want to drive an hour then back to your host home or wherever. So like the Ronald McDonald House 9 times out of 10 is like right down the street, or they have shuttles and they provide meals and things, which is awesome. And that takes a huge burden off of you when you're dealing with a sick child.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask for help, because we are fortunate to have a family member that really helped us with like hunting for an apartment. I mean, my one aunt, shout out to Aunt Barb, she's amazing. She called on probably 30 different apartments for us, and set up walkthroughs for one of our scans out there before we actually moved. And
it's a humbling experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just the help is just don't be afraid to ask. Because people want to help you. So
that's a good word. Don't be afraid to ask for the help. You guys both of your families went through a lot, with not just, traveling, but coordinating the housing and everything once you get there. One of the things that I think you both did a great job of, Garret, I know that you looked for a Popeyes when you were in Philadelphia. And I know that the Blauseys looked for some good pizza while they were in Cincy, right? Am I right?
We found it.
You got to find some things that make you feel the comforts of home and some good food while you're traveling. And let me just put a shout out there for those of you that might be watching that are considering healthcare travel to a different city. Several people have mentioned the Ronald McDonald House, and it reminded me of the packing lists that we have available on the Pressing On website, pressingon.org, hospital packing lists, whether you're headed to the emergency room or you're headed for a planned hospitalization or even a specific Ronald McDonald House hospitalization. You can download those on the website at pressingon.org. But we just talked about some things that you guys did really well. Moving on to the next question, it has to do with challenges. Obviously, we all could probably agree that the healthcare issues with our children is the greatest challenge, and we would sacrifice everything for them to get an answer, to get healing, to get a diagnosis, and that's the toughest thing on our mind. But as far as the healthcare travel, setting our children's diagnosis and procedures and things aside, what was the biggest challenge with the travel itself? It could have been coordinating childcare or someone to watch your home or setting up things in a new city that you weren't familiar with. But we'll start with the Welshes and then go back to the Blauseys. But what was the biggest challenge for you guys?
I think it was making sure that everything back at home was taken care of before leaving. So that was one less stressor to like deal with when you're however far away. We have 2 dogs, 2 cats, an older son. So it was, we needed to have someone take care of our older son. We needed someone to come to our house and take care of our zoo. We needed to make sure that whoever was taking care of the zoo was taken care of too. Things down to who's going to cut our lawn, who's going to writing down when to take the garbage out.
It was a full-time job just preparing to leave, not to mention the job while we're out there.
And utilizing things.
Right there, like they could relate.
Yeah. Do you have a similar amount of animals?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
well, we had 2 dogs and 2 cats, and now we have 3 dogs and 2 cats.
Bless your heart. Yeah, that ain't happening over here. But yeah, it's you don't even think about it, but you don't want whoever's staying at your house to worry about toilet paper and paper towels or dog food and cat food. So Chewy.com, thank you.
When we started planning all that, we literally went through every step of our day. And as we went through our day, it was just we had a laundry list of stuff we left for our amazing friend who stayed at our house.
And by laundry list, literally a binder.
Yeah, connections for the neighbors and people to call if there's house problems, and it was that was
Well, and having both have pets and an older son, you have a lot of similarities, and this was happening at like the exact same time last year. A huge difference though is Tara was going there to give birth in a different city too. So, you know, there's all these different options of, you know, you weren't really going to be able to spend time or even see your other son between COVID restrictions and you returning. And then, you know, on the flip side, the Blauseys were able to thankfully, you know, like take their son with them. So then you're juggling having another child there. So
yeah, so something else that was a challenge was, again, we're stuck in a small apartment in the middle of a very big city, not with nothing really to do. So isolation was a huge issue. I mean, we literally just sat in our apartment because there's a lot of other stuff going on that time of year last year that didn't allow us to really go out and about too much. So it's kind of just us two stuck in the apartment, which actually turned out to be a great thing because that was a lot of good time spent together. But yeah, with not having family and our son not being with us and not having the loud dogs around all the time, like, again, it was lonely. We made a lot of phone calls for that, you know, to kind of suppress some of that. But yeah, that was
I think it's just something you need to be aware of, though, that, you know, you need to have a support system or create that support system for yourselves too.
Right.
Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing those challenges. Back over to the Blauseys. Why don't you share with us one of the biggest challenges for you guys?
I think ours a little different because of radiation. You're there, you get there about 7, you're there till about 11, and then you have all day. So you just have to kind of find something to do with yourself. Cincinnati was a little bit more open, even during COVID. So we could, after about 2 or 3 weeks, I think a lot of things were starting to open. So we got to do a lot of things, which did turn out nice because we got to spend time together as a family of 4, going, you know, train museum. We went to the Ark and we went to the zoo. So it was really nice. It was nice, but just kind of finding stuff to do every day was kind of a challenge because you're just kind of sitting in your Airbnb if you don't find something to do.
Yeah.
And another thing is they weren't letting other children in. Obviously, a lot of hospitals weren't. So because our son was there, Bryan would have to sit in the car because we only have one car there. So Bryan, my son, would sit in the car while McKinley did her radiation, and I was the only one in there. So that was kind of tough being by yourself and then him having to sit in the car for 2 hours.
And I think one of the biggest is, like, since we were there and Cincinnati was a little bit more open because they didn't have the pandemic issue like Philly did, was actually using the concierge services with the hospital, because I mean we had I think it was like free tickets to the zoo. You could get tickets up each month, or it was a severely discounted rate that we got to, you know, to go to places, or I had the coupon code to get in there. So you know that was amazing.
Right.
Doing that. And then I think another challenge of ours was I was still working full time.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we got 6 weeks of paternity leave that I could still use, but I was working part of the week, and then Nicole's mom fortunately had a lot of sick family medical leave time, and so we were swapping out midweek, passing each other on 70.
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't have to be alone with 2 kids. And
so trying to balance that and working still. And unfortunately, I can't really 100% work from home in my job, so it made it a little bit more difficult. But, definitely finding the time to get out and, you know, get medical leave time was difficult. But yeah, we definitely agree with the Welshes on the whole part of trying to stave off boredom. That is a huge thing, and that's something that if you got board games, take board games if that's your thing. Whatever you can do to pass time and enjoy each other's company, do it.
if you're watching this video and you're a family member or friend or supporter of a loved one that's going through a tough healthcare crisis, hopefully through these family stories, you've gotten a couple of ideas of how you might be able to support them and help them well. But the isolation is real. The situations for every family is different, but the tendency for isolation, especially when you're going through a healthcare crisis, is real. And that's why we started Pressing On, to walk alongside of families in their time of need during their suffering and trials and healthcare crisis. And so as we continue the conversation, I'd love to know from both families' perspectives. You've got great doctors in cities, and great doctors sometimes might not necessarily know a piece of information that the other one knows. And, you know, with Pressing On, we want to uphold all privacy standards, and we want to just uphold every direction that a doctor gives. We're not doctors or anything like that. But at the same time, too, as parents of a medically fragile child, we resonate with the struggle that sometimes it's tough when you have so many medical experts speaking into a situation. So you guys have any advice for families on how to keep all the details straight and how to communicate with multiple teams and multiple doctors?
Well, we were actually quite fortunate because our doctor did his residency in Cincy, where we were going.
That's why we picked Cincy
So that's
over
part of the reason why we
Philadelphia.
picked Cincy over Philly. And so from day one, the expert doctor that we were referred to in Cincy was basically on our team in Pittsburgh. So we were quite fortunate that they were getting the initial scans after each chemo, getting to Cincinnati. So we were actually really fortunate that both of our teams communicated from day one and continue to communicate to this day. They still send our scans to Cincy after we're done here in Pittsburgh. So, you know, we were really fortunate on that.
I think the biggest thing is you have to be organized. As much as you want to think that the doctors have your child's best interest in mind, but at the end of the day, your mom and dad and your main concern is only your child. You know, they're taking care of other kids too. So I don't want to say that things get missed, but they sometimes can get overlooked, but you're there all the time. This is all consuming for you. You're your child's absolute biggest advocate. And that's your job. This is like a second job, is taking care of your child and making sure that everyone knows what's going on, and the information that they're giving each other is accurate too. Theo had a separate issue that we've been having him cared for in Pittsburgh now. So when that all started transpiring, we had to communicate with Philadelphia and here, and a lot of it is kind of on you, but utilizing the apps that the hospitals have too. I'm pretty sure like every major health system has them now. So we have both on our phones. I get alerts. You know, you can message through there, you can send things through there. But again, just asking for help too. Because, you know, it's a lot easier for a doctor to pick up the phone and talk to a doctor than it is for, hey, this is mom. Can you, so it's hard, but, you know, again, at the end of the day, you're mom and dad, and you know your child better than anyone.
And I would add in there that we're very fortunate Tara has medical background. I do not. So whenever the doctors would be in the room explaining things and, you know, going through blood work and, you know,
testing everything.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine. And I'm just sitting there like they can kind of read your face.
New terms every day.
Yeah, but they won't. But they're not gonna like go completely out of their way to, you know, break it down for you. So you have to be the parent and ask them to dumb it down a little bit. Because
I definitely agree.
I learned a lot. I mean, I did learn a lot once they put it in terms that I understand.
Yeah.
So
I was that guy that like would have like 15 questions for the doctors every day on rounds. And I just wasn't ashamed about it. I was like, I don't know. And I'm just going to be honest, and I need to ask these questions. She can absorb some of that information a lot faster than I can. And honestly, it's one of the reasons that we put notepads and pens in our on care packages now, because we tell families, we're like, write down your questions all throughout the day, because when you have that 5 minutes during rounds the next day, they'll escape you.
Yeah.
And you have to take that opportunity.
Right. We would write questions
Feel the
24/7.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
advocating for your child is something that you're passionate about too. Anything you like to add there?
No, absolutely. Just don't be afraid to ask questions. We can be really intimidated by the doctors and all of their expertise, and it's true. They're wonderful and brilliant. But what the other parents here have said, you're your child's best advocate. You know them best. Don't be afraid to ask questions. No question is a dumb question. Always ask the questions that you have. And then just to wrap everything
And I
up,
feel like
oh, go ahead.
I don't want people to feel like if you ever question or not second guess, but second guess something that they're saying, you know, don't be afraid to do that, because
they're human.
You have to learn to do that. And you have to learn to be like, I know what's best. Just because medically you think this is right, it's not. And you need to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of it too is you're going to see, your child's track record. So,
Right.
for a good example is, our daughter was a really hard stick for an IV. So we would say, you're probably going to want to call like the IV team. And they, no, I've got it. And that's an okay thing to say. No, we've seen her poked like 15 times. We're asking you to please do this. And they'll usually do it. It's just kind of holding your ground sometimes and saying, I know it's going to take longer, but we've seen this before, and being okay with them looking at you like you're a little crazy sometimes.
But advocating for your child, you're actually making the job easier in the long run, because you're giving them up-to-date information that they weren't in the room last night sleeping with them. So.
Every MRI still, we get one every 3 months, and I set the rules right when we get in there. You have 2 tries, and then you're done. Like, I'm sorry, this is she's been through a lot. We're not gonna poke her 6 times just because you feel like you can get the IV. No.
Yeah.
And don't feel like you're being mean about it. I mean, this is your kid. They've been through a lot. This person's only meeting them for 5 minutes. And if they get offended, they're only meeting them for 5 minutes, so it's fine.
Definitely balance a respect for healthcare professionals with advocacy for our kids. It's not either or. I think that we can do both in a very healthy way, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, just to wrap everything up, what additional tips would you give to other families planning to travel for healthcare, or anything that you did to just try to make the best of a really rough situation? Any last minute tips?
Just do your research before you go. Kind of, the hospital, where you're going, what's there, what's to eat. If you have, you can get out and have things to do. Even call, I think right before we left, like a week before we left, we had talked to our social worker there, who we never actually met because of COVID, but we talked to her a few times. We talked to the concierge office a few times, just kind of getting an idea of, we're coming, what do we do?
Yeah. I think just like another thing would be, don't be afraid to, I don't want to say enjoy yourself, but like you're allowed to like laugh and like have a good day too. Even if you're not at home, even if, you miss your other child or just family, and because it's hard, it's really hard. But 1, you're not alone, and 2, it's okay to like throw on a funny show or a movie and just like completely vegetate and not think about everything that's going wrong.
Everything around us is so serious that I remember we looked at one another and we were like, are we allowed to watch an episode of The Office right here? Like right now in the hospital room? Like, are we allowed to do that?
We've been living here for 2 months. Are we allowed to laugh or not?
But there's enough tears to go around, that sometimes you need to laugh to keep from crying. Like, laughter's good
Yeah.
for Nicole, even in the midst of a tough time. That's a good word, Tara.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said it further back, but again, with being stuck together, it actually, like, it was something that we'll probably never get to do again,
Yeah.
is be in an apartment alone together.
Without kids.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I've always said
The
last
good old
year.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said even
Um,
last year, you know, the hospital sucks, but it's kind of nice just to be you two. Like, yeah, there's stuff
Yeah.
going on, but like, yeah, just you two.
yeah, we enjoyed a lot of ice cream together. That was our crutch.
But
yeah,
making
so-
sure you give each other, or whoever it is that is your support system, giving them space when they need it, and giving them a lot of grace too, because, you know, not everyone deals with stress and terrible situations the same. So sometimes moods get a little testy. So
Well, I just want to say
not speaking from experience, of course.
No.
yeah. Thank you all for sharing your challenges, your tips, your support systems, all of that kind of stuff. You know, it's been a pleasure to kind of walk alongside of you guys in your journey. And Regan, I know it's something that you're passionate about as well, as we've spent a lot of time in the hospital with our daughter. But if there are families that are watching that are traveling to a new city, whether that's to our city here in Pittsburgh or to another city throughout America, maybe give them a couple of ideas of some ways that Pressing On can support them going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, first of all, check out the packing lists that are on our website. They're made by families who have stayed at Ronald McDonald Houses and have a lot of input and wisdom in that. So check out those packing lists, because our minds get foggy when we're focused on other things. And then please request a hospital care package from us. We'd love to hook you up with some sleep aids and toiletries and snacks and a notepad and pen and a water bottle, all of the things that you might find useful. So you can request one of those on our website. And if you're coming to the Pittsburgh area, we'd also love to provide a gas gift card for you that we provide through our gas gift card program. And lastly, just go and send us an email or request support, info@pressingon.org, because we love to connect families together. So maybe we could connect you with one of these families and you could, you know, bounce some ideas off of them with what it's like to travel. So feel free to reach out for help. We'd love to support you.
And we just want to say thanks again to the Welshes and the Blauseys. Thank you guys for sharing your story and for giving these tips to help us uplift, resource, and coach other families. And just a word to the families and support systems and loved ones that might be watching. We just want you to know that you're not alone. That's why we started this organization. And we want to walk alongside of you during your hospitalization so that we can support you well and care for you well in crisis. And so hopefully the stories that were shared tonight helped you feel that, you know what, you've got some families that are in your corner. And so thanks for tuning in. Check out the next video and keep pressing on, everybody.